So the impacts of COVID-19 lockdown restrictions are not merely economic. Many people have also reported significant emotional and mental health problems. Peter Bellion is a former crash scene investigator and reconstruction expert from Victoria Police's Major Collision Investigation Group, and he knows firsthand what it feels like to be stuck by post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, whilst on the job. Over Peter's 30-year career with Victoria Police, he attended more than 2,000 fatalities, including the deaths of 20 police officers. Continued exposure to traumatic events, including the Kerrang rail disaster and the Burnley Tunnel traffic tragedy, eventually took their toll and he was diagnosed with PTSD. But originally, Peter intended to join the RAAF, and he did an engineering degree instead, specialising in traffic engineering. This involved reviewing speed limits and the introduction of speed cameras, and he often worked closely with the police. He joined the police soon after graduating with his degree, and he worked in the southeastern suburbs. He became a specialist in accident reconstruction, and he was an advisor to the Road Safety Committee. In 2009, he was awarded the Australian Police Medal, one of only 6 members to receive this award. But after 30 years of service, he retired in 2016, having spent the last 10 years of service with PTSD. In 2018, he was awarded the Victoria Police Star, which is awarded to members who have been seriously injured or died while working. Peter has been involved very closely with one of our sponsors, the Huntingdale Golf Club, since he was young. He captained the Division 1 pennant in the mid-1980s, and he's been on the board for 10 years, and he spent 2 years as captain. He's also involved in training programs such as the Thin Blue Line for members with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he's an active member of the Port Melbourne Life-Saving Club. It is my honour to present to you Peter Bellion. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Meg. Thanks for having us along today.
You're welcome. And Peter, can you tell the audience a little bit about your role in reducing the road toll?
One of the things I was responsible for probably the mass introduction of speed cameras back in the 1990s. It was as a result of a report I did in 1986 as an engineer in my final year degree, and that report went along to Victoria Police, what was then Vic Roads or Roads Corporation, RACV, and that had 32 recommendations in it. And one of those main recommendations was the mass introduction of speed cameras to reduce the tolerance on speeding, because the crash rates identified that speed was a huge issue back then. Police weren't actually stopping people until they were doing about 20 k's over the speed limit back then. Cameras came in 1990s. 1989, we had 770 people killed on Victoria's Road. Initially, the tolerance from say 20 k's over in a 60 zone went down to about 10% plus 3, and as a result of that, there were 270 less deaths in a 12-month period. The prosecution rate initially was up around 80%, and then that dropped down to 2.4%, but now's less than 1%. So speed reduction has been a huge effect, and that's because as an engineer, when you design a road, you design for stopping sight distance based on the speed that you're designing for the road. And if somebody's travelling too fast, well, it throws everything out of kilter. It throws all those stopping distance calculations out, as do perception and reaction delays, because your stopping sight distances in road design also take into account those factors. So if you've got somebody that's fatigued, say been awake for 16 hours, that's the same crash risk as driving with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05. If you're awake for 24 hours and driving, that's the same crash risk as a blood alcohol concentration of around about 0.2. 60, 65 k's in a 60 k zone in an urban environment is the same crash risk as 0.05. If you're doing 80 k's in a 60 zone, the same crash risk as a blood alcohol concentration of 0.2. Mobile phones, touching a phone, talking on a phone, texting on a phone, or even touching the satellite navigation devices or a visual display unit in the car is a huge distractive effect. And the research shows that even with those systems, it's still equivalent crash risks of somewhere between 0.04 to 0.09, depending on what you're doing. And in some instances, texting is actually worse than being completely drunk behind the wheel, because you're not watching what's going on in front of you. Other things that come into, causing road deaths is poor eyesight, being inattentive, talking, being distracted, could be medical reasons, and things like that. There's been a lot of things to reduce road toll. Speed cameras was the main one, because the speed's around about 30% of it, but alcohol is also about 30%. With improved vehicle technology with various vehicle systems, airbags, initially frontal airbags, now side airbags, seatbelt pre-tensioners, energy absorbing steering wheels, crumple zones on vehicles, improving the roadside environment, sealed shoulders, barrier systems off the side of the road, and general improvements in vehicle design. So they're a number of things that have reduced it. But when you look at the road toll in general, over 90% is human error still. So it's people doing the wrong thing. And generally that's 1 in 10, day in, day out. And it's always going to happen when somebody's pressured for time, but the reality is, even if you're making the trip and your speed, you're not going to get there any real faster, because the way the road network is set up with the timing of traffic lights and all that sort of stuff. You can drive flat out and put extra more wear and tear on your car and use more petrol, and you might get there 2 seconds earlier, but it's not worth it, because it only takes a second for everything to turn pear shape on the road, and either your life is taken, or you're being seriously injured, or one of your loved ones has been seriously injured or killed, or you've killed or seriously injured somebody else.
Peter, getting onto the subject of post-traumatic stress disorder, for the audience that may not be familiar with PTSD, can you go through some of the symptoms for both early and later stage PTSD?
Yes, so PTSD basically evolves from, in terms of a military or first responders role, we're basically doing things that human beings aren't designed to do. We're going into a fight or flight situation as part of our work. Now, initially, as a young military personnel or young first responder, in your training, you'll have instructors that will yell commands at you and get you to work through your fear flight process. Like if you've got the cat that's being chased by the dog, well, generally the cat will try and get the hell out of there, and that's because it's that fear flight that wants to run away. Well, as a first responder, you can't run away. So each time you go and attend an event, there's a thing in the brain called the amygdala that controls your fear flight. And because you've got to go in, you are getting adrenaline released into your body to allow you to respond to that incident, and you're also getting cortisol, or stress hormone. Over time, as you go to more and more events, your risk assessment is getting higher each time you go to an event. So over time, you're getting more and more adrenaline and cortisol being dumped into your system. What that leads to then is initially the initial diagnosis of what's called post-traumatic stress disorder, and the symptoms will be things like waking up in the middle of the night with everything going a million miles an hour. You'll be sweating, the heart rate will be going, you might have some tremors and shakes. You might be waking up trying to yell out, police don't move, going through a situation where, I've got 2 shotguns, 3 knives and a long blade screwdriver put on me as well. So you're going through those, might be going through the memory whilst you're asleep, and then all of a sudden, bang, you're awake, and it's, then you've got to learn to calm everything down. So initially I used to get up and do a lot of training at that point in time. I'd go pump some weights, do a 10K run, 30K bike ride, and then go into work at 7 a.m. in the morning. You get home at the end of the day and you're absolutely stuffed because, you've been going so hard. So that's how I initially dealt with it, even though I didn't know that I had PTSD at the time. But that was probably the first inklings of what I had. So I worked with that, you know, and had a little bit of assistance early on in the piece, but effectively, you know, went back into the coalface, into the front line, and what that ended up doing was basically making that PTSD into what's called chronic PTSD. So it's like riding waves. You're getting that anxiety response, which is when the job's on, and it's go, 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 go. And then you're coming into the post-job phase where you're tired and emotional, and over time that becomes a depressive response. So what people will try and do is, in that anxiety response mode, they want to calm things down. So what they'll resort to is things like alcohol or drugs to calm things down. It could be you know, alcohol or cannabis, a depressive substance, you know, for example. But then they'll get into the post-job phase where the emotions and, you know, you're tired, which then becomes a depressive response. And if you've had a depressive substance like alcohol or drugs, then that depression can become deeper. So then the next step is potential suicidal thoughts, and if it spirals out of control, can lead to suicide, which for 30% of our military and first responders end up with post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-traumatic stress injury it's called now. And out of every, say, person that dies on the job, either in a car crash or being shot and killed, there's probably around about 8 to 1 in the police and also in the military that actually die from suicide because they haven't been able to manage their post-traumatic stress disorder later on. In the chronic format, you know, it can cause bloating in the stomach, it can cause bowel cancer issues, it can cause Alzheimer's or dementia, and it can also cause cardiovascular disease. So I've actually had some bowel issues. I've had 3 colonoscopies over the last few years and had a bit of stuff cut out, but all good at the moment. So that's something that just has to be regularly monitored. I ended up with 35% of my brain has been traumatically affected from what I went to. Anything over 30% is classified as a serious injury. And I've also got 1/5 of my total body area covered in what's called psoriasis, which is basically from too much cortisol being released into your body, and over time that causes things like psoriatic arthritis, which I'm starting to get a little bit now.
That's a big effect on the body, isn't it? So
yes.
with COVID presenting new challenges and possibly a new cohort of people, such as business owners who might develop PTSD or related mental health issues, can you suggest any preventative measures that would minimise the onset?
Well, first thing is, if you notice that you are struggling, the first trip is to go and see your GP, general practitioner, and speak to them about what's going on. In any, you know, to attack any sort of mental disorder, you will have that anxiety and depression goalposts. So those goalposts have to be attacked first off, and he'll refer you to, or she will refer you to a psychologist to look at something like, could be like eye movement desensitization treatment. It could be cognitive-based therapy. It could be exposure-based therapy. It could be utilising a thing called EFT, or emotional freedom techniques. But also they will refer you to a psychiatrist, and they will speak to you and find out your situation and put you on a medication regime to control those goalposts and bring them in a bit narrower. And then you can use other things like breathing control, progressive muscle relaxation, meditation apps on your phone such as Calm or Breathe or Aura or Equipped, and they'll talk you through, and you listen to them at the night time to basically calm your body down, to allow you to wind down and slow down and get back to sleep. Because the COVID situation has put a lot of businesses under pressure. One of the big things associated with stress is also financial stress. So a lot of people are going to be under financial stress, and that will cause problems with anxiety and depression also.
So how can workplaces be more open to people being assisted to deal with these mental health issues, or even just raise them with employers?
Well, as a leader in a workplace, you've got to have a good understanding of your staff. You need to know, what's going on, and be aware of what's happening on the home front. You've got to make sure that your staff have an appropriate work-life balance. It's just not all work. That there is that home balance as well, and that's most important in moving on. You also got to make sure that your staff are having appropriate social networks as well. One of the big things about policing or frontline emergency response or military is, over time you lose your social groups that you had when you were younger and growing up, and then you get involved in these groups that's just all police or all military or ambulance or whatever. So the things that you used to enjoy that you're doing when you're growing up, all of a sudden they get pushed aside. So it's important to try and keep those connections. From a boss's point of view, if you've got a worker that has been, generally it's the high achiever that will end up with some sort of mental condition or breakdown, because they're giving everything to get the job done and improve, and they want to move up the food chain and impress people. It's people that are a little bit perfectionist traits that might end up with these conditions. But you might notice all of a sudden, instead of the work getting done, the folders on the desk are starting to pile up, and indicating that they're not actually getting through the work, and that's because they've got to a point where a mental illness is starting to kick in, and they're having trouble with attention and concentration, which is one of the side effects or symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental conditions. So all of a sudden you might find that the work's not getting done where it previously was done. So rather than clamping down on that person, you haven't been doing this and this, you go to the approach, well, is there anything, what's going on? Can we have a chat? Do we need to help you out in some way? Can we offload some of this work to somebody else? Do you need to have a little bit of leave? Do you need to, do a bit more relaxation, or even have some programs in the office where you might have a group meditation session or a group training session or something like that makes it a better workplace.
So with first responders, service personnel, healthcare personnel having to leave their jobs due to PTSD, they'll move into civilian jobs, into the workplace. So this could be in a variety of workplaces. So have you got any tips that employers could do or better do to help them to manage their PTSD?
Well, certainly, an employer moving on from one of those careers, you need to let the people know that you actually have got that, so that they're aware of that, and have that conversation about what are the effects of that condition, so that they understand, and they don't then have that stigma or put you down as a result of what you've got, because you can still be quite effective as a person working with that condition, but some people might treat them otherwise. So what you've got to remember is that somebody that's got that condition, we've got to treat everybody with respect. And one of the first things in dealing with somebody that's a mentally impaired person I might have come across in the front line, whether it be policing or at the Lifesaving Club where I've come across somebody, or even in my role at the golf club I've come across people, is to initially treat that person with respect, develop a rapport, listen to what they're saying, and have an understanding of what they're saying. Don't just go in hammer and tongs.
You mentioned earlier some strategies, and I've also noticing on my screen that I've got a question come through. Very next question I was going to ask you. What are some strategies that assist you best when you feel that you're about to be triggered?
So one thing I used to get in the car was I'd get some sharp pain in the lower back. So I have a little stress ball that I might just jam between the lower back and the back of the car, which is like would relieve that trigger point. So that's one thing I would use. Certainly the tapping solution, you can get used to using that if there's various books on that. For example, EFT for PTSD by Dawson Church, the complete PTSD recovery process by David Redboard. They're available, and one of the big things I used to use was also this Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement by Kevin Martin. So I've read all those books from front to back and have a complete understanding. So there's other things like the progressive muscle relaxations. That's basically going from head to toe, squeezing the muscles of the body progressively, and then letting it all go. And as you're doing that, you're breathing in and breathing out slowly. If you find you're getting stressed or anxious, there's the 4-4-4-4 rule with breathing. So you can take a big deep breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, let it out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and repeat that process 3 times. And that has the way of relaxing your body down. The meditation apps I talked about, you can download things like Calm, Breathe, Aura. You can download them, and they talk you through a meditation process. And it just gives your brain a chance to wind down. Particularly, I do it, once I get into bed, I might just turn it on, and it just relaxes your whole body down and helps you sleep better. Other things I'll do, say at 2 o'clock, one of the times that I would typically wake up in that fight or flight mode as a result of stuff I've gone through in the past would be around that 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. So everything's going, heart rate's going, your sweat's going, you might have the tremors and the shake. So I will actually do specific stretches in the body, mainly to open the front half of the body. So some hip flexor stretches, because the hip flexors are attached into the adrenal glands, and that can help get rid of that bloated stomach sensation that you might get, because you get the bloated sensation in your guts because it's trying to protect your guts for that fight situation. So it's pushing your guts out from protecting you from a whack in the gut. So it's pretty uncomfortable. So you're trying to relieve that by that hip flexor type stretch or opening in front of the body.
So what message, Peter, would you give to employers about the benefit of a positive mental health message in the workplace?
I think it's most important to have some sort of programs associated with all businesses, awareness campaigns, some sort of awareness training, also, some sort of stress relief programs, teaching, you might even get somebody in to teach your people emotional freedom techniques, or teach your people about progressive muscle relaxation. They're important techniques, and explain why they are important, not just get them along to do them. You've got to explain why they're necessary, how it actually assists you in moving on a day-to-day basis.
So some colleagues might need support or assistance dogs in the workplace. How do you think employers could best accommodate that?
Yeah, well, assistance dogs are like guide dogs. The law allows them to go into any place. I actually trained a guide dog up and actually brought it down to the golf club a couple of times when I was training it. The assistance dogs are there to help. They distract a person that might suffer from anxiety. So if they're having an anxiety attack, that dog will actually know what's going on, and it will do something to distract that person's thoughts away from what was going on that was causing that anxiety response to calm them down.
So would you say that some individuals are more prone to PTSD than others because of their personality? I know you touched on perfectionism before.
Yeah, that's probably one of the main ones is it's generally the high achievers that, or ones that really want to make a difference, that tend to get it. You know, it's in the military, it's the ones that might, you know, storm out of cover, and when their mates are taking fire and do some tombstone courage act to, you know, break up that situation. So they're right at the extreme of that fear flight response in doing that. And you know, in my case, it was you know, getting called out a lot from in the middle of the night, where you're going from dead sleep to bang, full on response. So you're going from 0 to hero straight away. So it's you know, it's a pretty extreme set of circumstances.
It is. I can see I've got some questions coming in from the audience. I've got one here from Nikki. Employees who are experiencing issues often won't say anything because they think it will affect their job. How would you suggest that employers deal with this?
Well, that's the thing. That's where the stigma can come in. If the business or employees have an open policy about, okay, if you are struggling, you know, we want to help you, we want to get you better, we want to get you assistance, rather than, oh, that person's got this, they're no good forever and a day, they won't get a promotion. So that whole attitude's got to change.
I've got another question here from Narelle. What organisation would you turn to first for assistance?
Obviously in the, you know, some very dark times, going back a few years ago, you know, you've got Lifeline numbers. I also had access to a counselling number through Victoria Police Association, and you know, I can remember talking to them and walking around the streets and with suicidal thoughts back then when this was all going on. And you occasionally, you know, you still get, you know, you might be out walking and all of a sudden a suicidal thought will just come out of absolutely nowhere, and you go, where the hell did that come from? And that's sort of an indication to go back and have a check-in with, you know, my treaters. And as a result of this lockdown, where, you know, we haven't been able to play golf or haven't been able to go to Lifesaving Club tours, main outdoor activities I've actually had to tap back in with my treaters and look at a slight medication change throughout this COVID lockdown procedure myself.
It's not a question, but it's actually a comment from Nabil. He said, what an amazing story. Humans weren't designed to have that level of stress ongoing. We take so much for granted for not being on the front line. They are the real heroes. So,
yeah, thank you. That's very nice.
Yeah. And one more question I have here. What key strategies would you give the audience to manage stressful situations?
Well, the key thing is to keep calm in a stressful situation, and obviously breathing control is paramount. Yeah, you've got to be able to, like, I can still deal with pretty high intense situations. You know, I've had a guy at the Lifesaving Club approach me with a gun, and I had a gentleman in the car park at the golf club 6:30 in the morning, going back 12, 18 months ago now, that was very, very emotionally disturbed. So you got to stay calm and relaxed. Problem is now is if I deal with something like that now, straight afterwards I get a massive effect, and it's learning how to deal with that straight after. Like I've got certain medication I can take in really bad circumstances, but things like your tapping solution, the EFT, the breathing control, the progressive muscle relaxation, certain stretches, you've got a toolbox, and you basically work out what's going to work best at that particular point in time.
I've got something else here. Thanks from Anita, one of our nominees. Thanks for sharing your incredible journey, and congratulations on managing this disease and being an inspiration. Are you involved in any work health and safety prevention activities with the next generation of regulatory staff, such as police, inspectors, etc., so that we limit this exposure to the future generation? We seem to have some difficulty in Peter's connection there. I'll just move along a little bit. There are links in the handout section for people, a list of organisations in that handout section that you can download. I did also get some comments that people were not able to see the video, so I think we probably will be putting that link up for you as well. I'd just like to thank Peter for giving us some really interesting insights today and some excellent takeaways that we can think about to implement in our own lives and for the lives of those that we care about. And even though I can't see Peter at the moment, thank you so much for coming to speak with us. So COVID-19 has had a massive impact on our mental health. So if you or anyone close to you are experiencing distress or need help, there are many organisations that you can reach out to. A list of the organisations is in the handout section. And Peter, you're back. You probably missed.
Yeah, we had a slow connection issue. Everything went a bit frozen. It was a bit like one time when I was giving evidence by a video link to Mildura, and it all went slow, you see.
So I will thank you once again, even though you weren't there. Thank you very much for the insights. I do hope that our audience has received a lot of helpful information with what you've given us today.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work going on with police veteran support. There's also an advertisement I did for Department of Human Services, which if people want to have a look at, they just search my name onto YouTube. You'll see the ad I did for Department of Human Services. It's time to talk about mental health. And I'm also involved with VicPol Fighting PTSD Group, the Thin Blue Lines, Strongest of the Thin Blue Lines, Code 9 Foundation, and Victoria Police Legacy. So they're all programs to assist veteran police officers and families.
I've just got some final comments coming through before we close. Here's one from Lisa Westgate. She was a first responder in the ambulance. She speaks to recruits at the Police Academy fortnightly on these issues. And then a comment from Jeff Webb. Peter, you are amazing. Thank you for your contribution to human safety. Another comment from Nabil. Excellent, thank you. And in regards to Anita's question, very relevant. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. We've got about a minute left. So thank you, Peter. I'm sure that the audience would love to ask you a lot more questions, and you've got a lot more to say on this topic.